Yeah. Okay, so our story is we're trying to combine sustainability and health, aid health. And so what we came up with in our interviews is just a couple pain points of like being aware of disasters, how we can fix the current state, and just potential areas of opportunities. So we're trying to focus in on, we're trying to define what disaster really is. Like there's different stages of disasters when it starts, the duration of it, and just long-term fixing. So our story is we're trying to focus our end solution on a natural disaster, so like a drought, famine, something like that, locally, and kind of just the starting point and the duration of the disaster. I think we're still a little iffy on what our personas are, because we actually met quite a few different types of people in our interviews. So we met like a medical assistant, which she kind of gave us a lot of insight into what the current state issues are and her nice to haves on what we can do better. Whereas then we met day-to-day normal people who had actually experienced crises, or just stay-at-home moms, and they have a completely different perception of how they want to deal with disasters as opposed to exposing us to what the current state is, which is some of the stuff here, like how would they deal with a disaster. So these are things that like our medical assistant told us is messed up with the current state, and then our regular people told us how they would like to deal with a disaster and crisis. So, I'm totally.
So we're also just thinking about how relief efforts can be integrated with people with communities locally. So what that means is if you're here and you hear about something and you want to help somebody that's far away, generally we're really disconnected from that process, and so we can either donate, we text something, and it's like there's no real connection between you and the recipient. So we're trying to figure out a way to, in a sustainable way that's conscious of the usage and the resources and all of that, make a connection between those two sort of disconnected communities. So that's one aspect of it that we're trying to think about. And then the other thing that we're trying to think about is that most of the time when we talk about disaster and crisis and relief work, everyone's focused on the physics of it, you know, the basics, water, food, shelter, da-da-da-da. But that there's this whole other component that goes into it, either in terms of the state of mind of the people who are first responders, or of the state of mind of the people who are receiving the aid, that doesn't get taken into consideration. So we're trying to think about some of the things that we heard were that they don't feel like there's an element of chaos or stress or anxiety that doesn't usually get incorporated. So we're thinking sort of the direction we're heading in right now is to create some kind of toolkit that would address some of these issues in a disaster context. We're not exactly sure who our personas are, like Payal was saying, because we have a lot of them, so I think we have to identify and define a little bit more, but I think that we're heading in the direction of looking at a couple of different people who would be along the receiving line, and
like these were the three types of personas I think we were thinking about, is these outside people, like someone like a medical assistant, they're outside of the disaster and they're not necessarily experiencing it, whereas we have a victim who's actually in the actual disaster. And then another type of person that's involved in the disaster is like either one of the workers or like an observer. So he's not actually injured or anything, he's just observing people around him during the disaster. And we're done.
I wasn't sorry.
The last thing that we're thinking about doing...
False one.
Good, I'm going to continue. Is thinking about being creative with it and maybe incorporating art. That it gives us an ability to be flexible and maybe a little bit fun and whimsical, and that brings in another element that's not totally like, you know, Band-Aids and tents, but maybe something fun that would be really cool to receive if you're on the receiving end of a care package that feels like you're connected with somebody, it's useful to you, but it also gives you that moment of zen when everything's totally chaotic. Done.